What's going on? Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Happy Saturday. How's everything going?
Man, everything's love. Can't complain about anything. Up here wrestling with the kids, that's all.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are they up running around, bouncing around already?
And you're straight to the video game.
Straight to the game. Do they got the new one or they still they're waiting on Christmas?
We're waiting on Christmas.
Waiting on Santa. Okay.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
got you. I got you. Well, thanks for hopping on. Um, this was definitely due. Um, this is the Trophy Room episode 8 with Coach Fred Cannon. And the reason why I wanted to have you on was because I felt that you, over the years, have been able to gain invaluable experience in many different areas, AAU basketball, high school sports, and just being a pillar in the community that's setting the right example and allowing for kids to have someone to look up to and someone that they can confide in, kids and families programs to help decision make with their kids and just steer them in the right direction. So I would like to start, and what I like to do is have just, for me personally, the reason why I want to have, or I wanted to start this platform was to just build relationship with people and strengthen my network, but also get to know them, not just on the surface of coach does X, Y, and Z, but kind of how you got to where you are now. Obviously, life's experiences allow for us to be where we are now. So if you would just kind of start at the beginning, kind of childhood, where you were brought up, what were some of your experiences, and kind of go from there.
Gotcha. Well, I grew up in Caswell County, which is about 35 minutes north of Greensboro, North Carolina. Small rural community. Grew up, farming community. We had a lot of farmland, so that was kind of the thing to do was you was gonna be a farmer or work in a mill or some of that nature. So growing up,
You cut. I can't hear you, Coach.
okay, we wanted to make sure that the family business was intact. So that was kind of the primary focus for us growing up. I started playing baseball first at an early age, and that was really my naturally best sport. So I kind of gravitated to baseball growing up, and that's what I really excelled in all the way through high school. Played basketball as well. I'll tell people all the time, like in high school and stuff, I was probably average at best at basketball. Really excelled at baseball, but part of that reasoning was that we didn't have a YMCA or Boys and Girls Club. There was no access to any indoor gym facilities other than just high school basketball season. So it
Was
wasn't
there
a
was there access was there access in some of the bigger areas? Like if you would have went to Greensboro, was there access
yeah.
or
It was access, but for my family, there was going to be no way for me to be able to get to Greensboro on a regular basis. Not enough to be consistently good. So
Mhm.
that was kind of the thing for those rural areas. And I have a real understanding for kids today that grew up in rural areas. Not to say that they're at a disadvantage, but it's definitely different than growing up in a Greensboro or Charlotte, where you have access to trainers and facilities and stuff like that year round, where you have access to. But
Mhm.
growing up, we played outside the whole 9 yards like everybody else, dirt courts. If we could make it to a park, and once I got to high school and could drive, we did a lot of pickup games and that type of deal. But my fascination with basketball at that point in time was I just loved to watch it. I was a huge ACC fan. We didn't have cable growing up as well, so all the sports that I was exposed to was strictly ACC or Raycom sports. And my favorite player growing up was Randolph Childress. I was a huge Wake Forest fan, and I watched every single game. Like that wasn't an ACC game that I didn't watch. I grew up watching, going to the grocery store with my mother, just so I could get access to the Street Smiths books. And I would go through and write down all the incoming guys who was going to be in the McDonald's game. And I started doing that probably at like 7 or 8 years old. And I just always wanted to know who was coming up next. And so that's kind of my background as far as my initial love for basketball. I was ninth grade on up. I had 2 jobs in high school. Played baseball, played basketball, very active as far as student council, ROTC, FBLA, FFA. I did pretty much everything that gave me access and resources to travel, because otherwise I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So it definitely made me more well-rounded as a person growing up. It opened my vision up to understand that growing up in Caswell County wasn't the end-all, be-all for my vision of what I was trying to do. And so I ended up going to UNC Charlotte for college for the first 2 years. Then I was able to get an internship up at VF Corp in Greensboro. And once I got that internship, I ended up transferring to UNC Greensboro, finishing out my undergraduate and my master's at UNCG. And during that time, back in 2000, which would have been my sophomore year, that's when I first started doing basketball. I was coaching the team at the YMCA, which eventually turned into my first AAU team with the Greensboro Panthers with Delaney Rudd, Keith Gatlin. Those guys introduced me into travel basketball. From that point in 2000, I also began to coach middle school basketball at Lincoln Middle School in Greensboro, North Carolina, while also coaching with the Greensboro Panthers, which eventually became the Team Phoenix organization. And did that.
Coach, during that time, did you work any camps? Like, I know back in the day, even to a certain extent now, when you're a younger coach trying to get repetition and build your network, you go to work Wake Forest, you go to work Duke, you go to work Carolina if you can, if you have the if you're blessed enough to have the opportunity to possibly know somebody, or there's just an open spot. Did you do any of those camps?
Didn't do camps, not those camps. Like 5-star was the big thing at that time. Like everybody was trying to get the 5-star camp. Like that was the major plug to get linked in. At that point, I really didn't know I wanted to get that involved in it. It was kind of, I'm just here to help these kids out. Because I was maybe 21, 20, somewhere in that ballpark. So it was kind of like, I'm going to do this to help these kids. But I wasn't thinking like career based at that point. I didn't know really what I wanted to do with it. I just knew I loved teaching kids basketball and I loved being around the kids. But it was more so just helping the community at that point. So I wasn't really attending any camps at that particular juncture of, when I first started. It was just generally just an interest in helping the kids at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't get to the camps and stuff until it was probably 2007, somewhere in that ballpark. I was probably 6 or 7 years in, and that's when 5-star, it went from just being in, what was that, New Jersey or Virginia? I can't remember exactly what it used to be. But they started to broaden out, and they would have regional camps throughout the country. So I started doing a couple of the 5-star camps. We used to host some pretty large camps here in Greensboro as well at the Greensboro Sports Complex when it first opened. So I was very active in those two things. So that's kind of where my vision of kind of hopefully one day doing basketball as a career really started. That was probably about 2005, 2006.
And in the meantime, were you working at the same time?
Correct. So I was still in college, so I was still doing undergraduate. I was also working full time as well. At that point, I was also married already too. So like it was a full day as far as my schedule went. I was also training kids at that time. So typically I was going to school from about 12 and then going to work from about 2 to 6, 2 to 7, and then I was training at night. So I was going from like 8 to 10:30 training kids, and then training all day on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. I was at the gym pretty much 10 to 12 hours a day just training kids. So it was a full schedule for me that was probably about 6 years straight doing that schedule.
I got you. And then, so that transitioned into at some point Team Felton.
Correct. So I started coaching high school basketball at Western Guilford High School. That was like 2007. That was
How long were you there for?
I did the 2 years at Western Guilford because once we started Team Felton in 2008, that was a previous director who ended up leaving, and I took over at that point. It was like 2009 I took over. Once I took over the whole organization, I had cut one loose because it wasn't enough time to do the high school sports and manage the program. So really about 2009, I took over Team Felton. I was coaching Team Felton full time and directing the program. So at that point in time, I strictly became, Team Felton director.
Tell me about some of the experiences that you learned at the high school level.
High school was different because I really, when people talk about the grind, my coaching career wasn't just streamlined to, Team Felton basketball. I'm on the highest level. I went through middle school to JV to assistant on varsity, the whole 9 yards. But what it really taught me at the high school level was it was kind of an introduction to the political side of sports.
Yep.
Also dealing with parents and expectations. You see these kids every day, and you're more involved with the academics while you're in high school. So you're seeing the kids underachieving in the classroom. You see their behavior walking through the hallways. And even if that was unsatisfactory, the parents still expected for those same kids to get the same rewards as the kids who were doing everything the right way. And it just kind of opened my eyes up being a young coach that, sometimes dealing with the parents, you're not always going to agree on what's best for their kids. Because I'm really big on academics. I don't let academics slide. And so a lot of times I would punish, well, it ain't necessarily punishing kids, but I would make them go to study hall or tutoring instead of basketball practice. But as a result, if you didn't practice with me, you didn't play under any circumstance. So a lot of times that meant, hey, you're going to miss this game this Thursday because your academics are suffering, and the parents would be upset. So that really kind of just introduced me to that, you're not always dealing with the same playing field in high school. And a lot of times the administration could be hit or miss. Sometimes they just don't want people in their office. So even those people aren't supporting you pushing academics or, correcting behaviors. That was the biggest thing I learned from high school sports, was just kind of learning to deal with the parents. They're, hopefully trying to make an impact on the kids, even though they don't understand what's best for them at the time.
How did you grow as a coach?
As a coach, I grew a lot because high school and AAU is completely different. With AAU, a lot of times you're traveling and you play teams and you really don't know those kids. So it's hard to really develop a game plan. With high school, you see those guys, people scouted you 2 or 3 times the week before. They got game tape that's being shared. So, and you're dealing with a lot. At the times you had like some really legendary coaches in this area they forgot more basketball than I knew at the moment. So you were really learning on the fly, making adjustments in game. Especially defensive adjustments, because those guys had plays and stuff that they've been putting in systems they had had for 15, 20 years at the time. And here I am, this brand new coach, trying to establish myself and, try to make adjustments on legendary coaches. So again, it made me understand that my goal as a coach is to make sure we stay competitive in those games to give my guys the best chance to win. Because at that point in time, I didn't have the knowledge to actually out-coach some of those guys that had a lot of the tenure. And it also helped me understand. Coach Price is the main guy that I think about the most. Coach Price was the head coach at Dudley High School. Coach Corbett, that's at Grimsley High School here in Greensboro. Guy Shavers, who won 2 or 3 state championships at Southwest Guilford. Coach Kent at Page High School, who's now retired. These guys were, legendary in the community. And like I said, they forgot more basketball than probably I ever know. But those guys, they taught you how to develop kids too. You watched a lot of their players go from pretty good ball players to extraordinary ball players, especially on the high school level. Those guys could pick you apart. Any weakness in your defense, they had somebody that could take advantage of the weaknesses. And that's where I learned that I had to be, I call it more than a one-level coach. Because going from AAU, if you have a good enough press, you can win most games at certain levels if you got certain athleticism. At high school, if your kids don't really understand rotations and angles and stuff like that, and you play a good team, they'll chop you up. And that's really what I learned on the fly, is that you have to be more prepared than just a surface level defense and surface level offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me is you said those coaches were able to do a great job of developing players, and on the other side of the coin, the reason why they were able to develop players is because they also did a great job of developing young men. and holding them
Correct.
accountable. And then obviously when you're able to put those two things together, then you have a more well-rounded basketball player.
Definitely. All those coaches as well were strong in the community. So I think their presence to those kids and what they meant to their schools and this community also set the tone for that basketball. Understood that the person that was leading them was worthy of leading them. So their respect from those kids was off gate. And for me being a young coach, I had to earn that respect and that support. And that's when I understood that it wasn't going to be a short grind either. To be good in the sport on any level, whether it's a coach, a player, a skill developer, you're going to have to put that time in. That tenure teaches you a lot. And those butt whoopings I got early on, that taught me a lot because it teaches whether you want to do it or not. You find out if you love coaching after you get your head knocked off. You have to go face those kids in the locker room.
And it forces you to get better. You have to learn. You
Totally.
got to study.
Definitely. But that comes with it. I mean, like, say, even as a player, you're going to eventually run into somebody that's going to get in front of you and tear you up. And that's really how you respond is going to determine how long you stay in this game. So for me as a coach, I went through the same bumps. Run into something. I would tell my kids. I wasn't too proud to let my kids know, hey, I lost you that game because I didn't have you prepared. But I would make sure that week after, I called every coach I knew, hey, this is what they threw at me. What do you recommend? And that's really how I started learning. But being humble is the best way to learn. And I tell my kids that all the time. Like, you don't know everything. I don't know everything. So ask questions and then figure out what works best for you. And that's learning that early, it helped me be way more successful than I thought I would be in this game.
Mm-hmm. All right. So transition into, before we move on, I wanted to do my research about, just trying to find your experiences and who you are, where you're from, et cetera, et cetera. I did see you with that big throwback Texas Rangers jersey on with the fitted.
Yeah.
I did see that.
Yeah,
I also went to I went to UNC Charlotte too. That's how I originally got down here.
Okay.
I got my undergrad at Charlotte, and I managed for Coach Major, Coach Oliver,
Gotcha.
Coach Vandross, and Coach Odom. Also Mark Bielkowski, who's up at Maryland, and also Coach Perrin for a little bit, who's at Catawba.
Okay.
So I saw you say something about Charlotte the other day, and then when I scrolled back and saw that you went there, kind of put two and two together. So that's kind of how I got down here. And I thought it was, I think they got, not to go off topic, but they can just put that thing together. Obviously this season it's a little different than every season. So you're hoping that teams can adapt and try to be at their best, whatever their best could possibly be in this environment.
Right.
But I think Coach Sanchez is an absolutely wonderful leader, coach, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them put it together because Charlotte really has everything. It's
Everything.
The best city, the best campus, and now they got a really strong staff. So it's like I would really love for them to be successful. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Anytime I talk to college coaches, I always tell them, like, if I could take any job in North Carolina outside of, the Duke or Carolinas, UNC Charlotte would be the number one job that I would take, period. Partly because when I was there, I experienced it. We had to sleep out for tickets when I was there. That's when Rodney White and all those guys was there. Diego. You had to sleep out. It was just like going to a Duke game. The conference was super strong. I remember Larry Hughes was at St. Louis. Kenyon Martin was at Cincinnati. Quentin Richardson was at DePaul. Like, we were playing like NBA guys every single night. And seeing what Luke's did to build that program up and how electric it was on campus all the time when those games come up. Like, I think Sanchez and his staff has a really good chance of doing that. But the facility,
they got to stay patient with him. They got to trust the process.
Definitely, and that's a big thing. But I think he'll be able to do that. Their temperament, the environment that they're setting down there at UNC Charlotte, I think it's going to be a little Virginia when it's all said and done. Like I said, they're patient with it and they can get the right kids in. I expect them to win a lot of games down there at Charlotte.
That'd be great. It would be great for the city. It'd be great for the school as well. I would love to get back in Halton and hear it rocking.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so transition to Team Felton, but also talk about the relationships that you had to cultivate and come across in order to have the opportunity to become the director over there.
Man, I'll be honest with you. Like I tell everybody, I'm a spiritual guy, and how all that stuff played out for me to get involved and for that to happen, I always tell everybody it had to be God's hands on it because it really didn't make sense for me to fall in that position. But I was coaching at Western Guilford High School. The Greensboro Gators was the big team. North Carolina Gators was big. That's who Harry Giles and those kids were playing for at the time. The varsity head coach at that time was coaching them in AAU, and he had never done AAU, so he asked me to come on and start helping him. Eventually, we played against Raymond's nephew, Jalik, who was playing with a team out of Charlotte, and we beat him, about 20 or 30 points. Raymond had just got drafted by the Bobcats not too long before then, and he saw Harry and was like, hey, I want to put my nephew with Harry. What do we have to do? And those conversations were had, and he eventually was like, hey, can I just make this my organization? So we had a really good team. And then
How old,
2 years
how old were they?
They were in the 5th grade. So 10 and under, 10, 11 and under is when we started. So we had.
What were some things that what were some things that you saw out of Harry in those early days that gave you great confidence that, oh, this kid is something special?
Man, it was no drill he couldn't do. And if it was something that you stumbled upon that he was a little weak on, by the next practice he had it. Like he was just one of those kids that you didn't have to show 3-4 times. And the difference maker was he could take drill work and apply it to the game almost instantly. If you showed him a move, at that point in time it was strictly like drop steps and little simple stuff like that. But he knew how to feel a guy at 10 years old and know how to get like he was just phenomenal. He could get the ball and go coast to coast. Like it wasn't just straight line drives either. Like, he would misdirect behind the back, counter moves, and this was at 10 years old. So you knew, like, he was one of the kids.
Was he training? Was he training then, or was he still just kind of?
Yeah, he was working with Kenneth Bates. He's been with Bates almost since I've known him. So that was maybe, I think Harry's maybe 8 or 9 years old when I first met him. He's been with Kenneth Bates almost that whole time. And, I mean, he's just been, like I said, it wasn't too much anybody could say that they coached that kid up. That kid was already phenomenal at 9 or 10 years old. Jalik Felton was his back.
How about his mentality?
That was probably
his
biggest weakness. Yeah, at that age, he cried a lot because he had a lot of expectations on him. And if he didn't, he felt like in his heart, even at 10 years old, if he didn't get 20 and 20, like he just felt like, oh man, coach, I let the team down, or I could have played better. Like his expectations for himself was always, to me, I wouldn't say unrealistic, but he really set the bar high for himself, even at 10 years old, to make sure that he led us, as far as he could during those times when AAU was the big platform. Like he wanted to make sure that we was at AAU Nationals and doing that thing, but he didn't handle failure well at all. So that was the biggest thing that we worked with him on, is understanding one is a team sport. And we had a lot of good players. So it's not strictly on you if we want to lose a ball game. And then understanding how to handle, he would get frustrated real easily with double teams and triple teams and stuff like that, hard fouls. But it helped him grow up, because once he learned to handle that, Harry could have played probably 2 age groups up and still dominated at that point. But he was still a kid. He was a 6'5", 10, 11-year-old kid, And so I think a lot of times as coaches, especially, we get caught up in I don't want to say the hype or whatever's going on with travel ball or high school, and you just see these kids as ball players, but they're still kids. So we still had to make sure that he had fun and balance that life out and make him understand that he's not getting paid. I used to always tell him, like, you're not under contract to do this. Like, still be a kid and have fun, that type of deal. But I think at that point in time, he still had already put a lot of pressure on himself. So we had to always manage that. But, I mean, he was awesome. And I couldn't say nothing bad about that kid at all.
I tell parents all the time, 5 years old, 7 years old, 9 years old, 14 years old, 17 years old, 19 years old, he's still a kid.
Definitely.
At the end of the day.
All the way up. kids. Like, it don't matter how big they are, how strong they are, what the mixtape look like, they still kids. And we used to always talk about that. I always used to tell my guys, this is the last time where basketball is going to be fun for you. And I used to tell them that because now it's going to become a business. College is a business. NBA, if you make it that far professionally, is a business. AAU in high school, you're going to have fun. It's about hanging with your guys. It's about, all the moments off the court that really make this experience special. So we used to always try to make sure our kids understood that and not always making it a business for them.
Yeah. Which is important because I think there's a fine line, and until I have a child and I go through it, some things are just not for me to understand. But there's, depending on the relationship of the parent and their child, some parents, they're just extremely hard on their children, and that's their relationship. Who am I to say that that's the wrong way? Because sometimes that's what gets them to whatever their ceiling is. Or there's going to be situations where that was our relationship and now there's resentment because of X, Y, and Z as a child, and the approach that you took that I, as a player or a child, necessarily wasn't ready to take. Or there's also parents that may be too naive to even want to be stern and hold their kid accountable. So I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I just know at the end of the day that they're kids.
Correct. And that's the other thing I learned. You was asking about what I learned as a coach was I couldn't coach every kid the same way. When I first started, I was a screamer, I was yelling at everybody, and certain kids wouldn't respond to that. And partly what I learned was if I'm cursing you out during the game and then mom and dad get in the car and they cursing you out after the game, it's overkill at that point. So what I started learning was kind of observing how the parents reacted to the kids. And then I did the opposite. So if I knew you were getting, yelled at in the car, then I would give you the pat on the back during the game. Like, come on, Ray. Like, I know you can do this. I don't want you to do X, Y, and Z. I just took a different approach. And you could see the kids just kind of light up at that point because you're making that adjustment to try to reach them or motivate them. And I think that's something that we all as coaches lose at some point. And I think part is being competitive in the midst of the game. You just want to win. But at the same time, you start realizing these kids are dealing with issues at school, whether it's a girlfriend, the grades, whatever. Whatever you're dealing with as a teenager, they still dealing with it, whether the game is going on or not, if it means a lot to them. And I just started understanding that because I started having some kids come to me, saying, Coach, I don't even know if I want to play basketball no more. Or, Coach, I don't know if, basically losing the love for the game. And that just tears me up to know that a kid is, I know they love the sport, but outside factors is making them not want to do it anymore. That's not what we're here to do as coaches. So for me, I've never, at that point in time, once kids started telling me, they may not like the game anymore, you have to adjust at that point, because as a coach, you're supposed to be a leader, you're supposed to be a teacher. And it's not, we love to win, but you don't want to take the love away from the game from anybody. That's the absolute worst thing you could do.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys have a passion for the game and they want to help the kids be good, and they have experience at a surface level, and they try to make up for the lack of experience and the lack of IQ with the yelling and the screaming because they don't know how to say what they want to say. And that's what a majority of, I guess specifically AAU, I don't know, I don't want to say majority, but I'm positive 50-50 that there's a lot of guys who are genuinely passionate about helping the kids. They just don't have enough knowledge to verbiage and get across their points how they would like to get them across. So they yell, which in most cases is not of benefit to the kids because you're not giving any guidelines to what you're trying to get me to do. So the kids are, first of all, they already don't know how to play the game as individuals. They don't know how to play the game as a team. So if my coach is yelling at me, and I want to make you proud, right, Coach? I want to do the right thing. Right. I want to be good, but I need some more guidelines as to specifically what you want me to do. And if you would, please tell me why you're not screaming at me. So I think that just goes back to coaches have to continue to study the craft and hone the game. And it takes experience. It takes those times for you to get better. And then I think just as a young coach, even if you do have a ton of experience or enough experience and you go against those coaches that you're speaking about who were coaching for 20, 25 years,
Right.
then you almost have to make up for your lack of IQ with energy and enthusiasm and Shaka Smart at VCU. But he ain't
Right.
doing the same stuff that he was doing at VCU now because, I mean, in spurts, but he's much more versed. He knows exactly
Correct.
what he needs from his team and how to get it out of him without having a migraine after the game.
Correct. And I'm guilty of it. That's why I knew early on, like that's exactly what it was. I'm thinking it's one thing to play basketball. It's another to get another individual to do what you want them to do and
Mm-hmm.
execute it. And the
Mm-hmm.
frustration of somebody not executing it, learning to handle that as a coach is the hugest factor in this. You still want to motivate your team. By the time I got about 6 or 7 years in, my biggest thing is defense. There's no leeway on you're gonna rebound and you're gonna play defense, period. Like there's no leeway on that. They knew if I got on them to that point where I'm screaming, it was because the effort wasn't there. I'm not hollering at you about shots, a bad pass, whatever, because those things happen, especially at kids' age. It's going to happen. You know, the time is not there. We don't practice enough to expect perfection on execution. So as long as they understood where they were supposed to be, where the pass was supposed to go, if it didn't execute, fine, get back on defense, let's get it back. Now, if you put your head down and jog back, then yeah, you're going to get another side of me at that point because my
Mm-hmm.
expectation is for you to play hard no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
You can control that every minute of the game. Your shot's not always going to fall. You're going to make bad reads sometimes, whatever the case may be, but I can't forgive you for lack of effort. But again, that took me probably 5 or 6 years to develop that as a coach. Because one, I was still maturing myself. I was still like 20, 21 years old, trying to coach these kids up. And you described it to a T. It's kind of like, man, we're going to play with this passion and all that. But if you run up on a good team that knows how to execute, you can have as much passion as you want to. They're just gonna pick you off. You know, it doesn't matter. They're gonna execute their work because they're just more prepared than you. But
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a lesson to a lot of coaches. And you're right. Like I've done high school and AAU. You see it a lot more on the AAU side because I think again there's less practice time. A lot of times you got rotating players, so you don't really have that relationship with the kids. A lot of times it's a
And
dad.
more guys can get involved.
Definitely.
You
So
can
it's
just
just
be
one of those
involved.
things of I tell everybody it's almost like coaching the NBA and coaching college. It's a little harder to cuss LeBron out, and he's making $300 million and selling all the seats in the arena. And there's a lot more to that dynamic than just player coach. Where
Mm-hmm.
AAU is a lot more dynamic than just player coach, especially at the higher levels. Your shoe brands is involved, and all that stuff. So it's more than just coaching the kid to make them better. You trying to manage all the politics behind it and all that stuff, the business of it. So it's definitely a different means of coaching between the two.
Yeah, I agree, 100%, 100%. Um, tell me about some of the glory years that you guys had at Team Felton. Some of the years
Uh,
where I'll just let you talk. I always do this thing where I ask a question and then I elaborate on what I want you to talk about. It's
but no,
so
you can
kind
you can point in the right direction because I mean it's a lot. We did it for this would have been the 11th year, um, and we've always been super competitive. But I would say like the years that stick out to a year that was. We went to nationals and made a really good run. The very next year, we finished fifth. Those years, that team consisted of Harry Giles, Jalik Felton, Jamie Newman, who will be in the NFL draft this year, Jeremiah Brown, wide receiver, played with Wake Forest, Jalen Seegers at Fayetteville State, Michael Buchan just graduated from Lipscomb, Sim Gatlin was playing football at Morgan State. These guys it was our first complete team to me. Like we had size, we had wings, we had skill. Like the kids were really coming into their own at that point. And I don't think we lost but like one game in North Carolina, and that was to the CB Spartans, which had Bam Adebayo, Seventh Woods, Dennis Smith, Quay Parker, Ty Graves, all those guys on that team. We lost to them by 1 point in the state championship. That was a real memorable year, real special class. My 2017 class, which would have been Jalik's senior year, or going to his senior year with Jordan Perkins, Cam Langley, Big Iron Bennett. Joey Baker was a freshman playing 17U. Greg Gant was a freshman playing 17U. We finished third on Under Armour that year. And we went on a run.
Were they playing 17U because you just didn't have guys in their position at the 17U? And they were basically
the way we said
they were just like that.
Yeah, the way I set my program up was, and I learned this from watching Brian Clifton when I was first getting into it. He was a big proponent of playing kids up if they were sized by position was fitting. So Joey was already like 6'6" in 8th grade, but he was a perimeter player as well as Greg Gant. And when we let them play 15U that next year, we let them play like 2 tournaments at 15U, and they were putting up like crazy numbers. And I was like, and it was strictly off of physical dominance. They had nothing to do with skill. They were just bigger and more athletic. And I told them early, like, if it's cool, you can go put the stats up. But for us to find out really where you're at, we're going to have to play you up and see how you do.
Did they do that on the circuit? Was that like a circuit tournament?
Yeah, that was on the Under Armour circuit. And the very first game, Joey had like 24 or 25 points as a 15-year-old in the first circuit game, playing the 3. So it was one of those things of he needs to be playing up at this level for him to continue to get better. Because what you do, if you don't play the kids at the right level, they get a false sense of security. Hey, I'm good. I don't have any deficiencies. But when you put them up at 17U, and you figure at a lot of 17U events, a lot of those guys are almost 19. So you really stretching, you 15, 16 playing against 19. You're really going to find out physically, I can't make that cross-court pass, stuff like that. It was the biggest thing that he started to learn. But he also understood how to be pushed and play in front of college coaches at an early age. We didn't do it with everybody. It really had to be a size by position thing. Like I said, Greg and Joey both were about 6'6", going into 9th grade year, and both had perimeter skills. So it made sense to play those guys up. But for my 17U teams, I always put the best 12 players on that team, regardless of grade, 9th through 11th or 12th. You were going to be on 17U.
Did you run into any issues? And I think from my experience, the only issue with having a 15-year-old play 17U on a talented team is you want them to play up, you want them to get the repetition, you want them to have to work harder in practice. But we also want to find time to get them on the court in the games. And I know that there's a number of kids who they could play 17U, but on some of those 17U teams, if we're trying to win games on a circuit, you're probably not going to be on the court. So there's a fine line between I want him to play 17U and because that's where he can be challenged the most, but also we want to find time to get some minutes because we can only get better if we have minutes, right? We don't want kids going an entire weekend in Dallas and if he was playing 15 or 16U, he'd be playing every minute of every game to go in to play 17U, and now he's playing 8 minutes a game. Did you ever run into those issues with the younger guys?
No, I never run into that problem because the way we always handle our rotations at 17U was strictly based on, especially during the live period, I would make all these phone calls and texts to all these college coaches, and they would tell me, hey, we're coming to the 9 o'clock game to see Ray, Fred, and such. Mm-hmm. Well, I would talk to my coaches and my kids and say, look, Ray's got Oklahoma coming this morning and Fred's got Wofford coming in the morning. Those 2 guys are starting. And we just did that for every kid in the program. So it wasn't a set starting lineup for us because it's an exposure, an event. So I would tell my kids, like, the winning is great, but I'm here to get you in school. So my kids trusted that when it was their turn to be seen, they were going to be seen. So I never had any problems with that. Joey actually, when it came crunch time, when we got the UA finals, Joey was starting for us. Joey averaged like 17 as a freshman on UA circuit. So he earned that starting spot beside Jalik, Cam Langley, Jordan Perkins, Iron Bennett, and we picked up Leaky Black at that point too. So he was playing with some good kids. But if you look back on, I think Joey shot like 44% from three that year as a freshman.
You needed him on the court to stretch the floor.
Yeah, like because we had Jalik and we had three amazing guards that was going to break down the defense, and we had Iron, which is almost like a double screen on every play.
Yeah,
if he went under, Jalik was going. We always put Jalik, Iron, and Joey on the same side of the floor. Mm-hmm. So when Jalik came off that screen roll, if Joey's man helped, he was wide open.
Yeah.
If he didn't help, Jalik was going to dunk it, or he's going to dump it off to Iron. So it was a real hard offense for teams to guard. But Joey made the most of his moments, and he knocked the shots down. Greg was like our first sub, and he could sub in at the 3, 4, or 5 against most teams. So there was a lot of minutes available for him as well. But I didn't put you on 17U if you weren't going to play, because that defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. My goal has always been to get my kids in school. The winning is cool, but I used to tell my kids we could win the UA championship, and if my kids don't go to college, I failed. Like, we wasted the summer. That's how I felt. I could go buy a trophy. I can go buy a trophy and put NBA Finals champion on it. But when I turn my TV on every day and I see my kids in school, there's no trophy bigger than that. And so that's always been my main goal. So whoever had a coach coming to see them play, that's who played. And, you know, with that being the case, every kid in our program is going to school on scholarship if they chose to. Some kids chose academic route, but if they wanted to go play basketball or football, they went to college on scholarship. So that was the biggest thing for me. That's the biggest success of our program.
And how much of you saying that all your kids went to school on a scholarship was predicated on your network that you had been able to build over the last number of years?
Oh man, like I used to send I still have it. We have a file right now that has a phone contact and an email contact for every D1, D2, and D3 school in the country. I still have that updated right now. I also have JUCO. My JUCO directory is pretty large now too. But I always make sure, and that's something I learned about 10 years ago. How
much is that for sale for, just in case people want to buy a coach?
I don't know if I release all the information. We just have to talk on some of that.
You might be able to make a pretty penny off of that.
I could. I definitely could, because what it took for me to gain all that information. 10 years ago, I started just going to practices every week. I would drive around the state, go introduce myself, the whole 9 yards, like email coaches. I would contact at least 10 coaches a day. I've been doing that for 10 years now. And I've never stopped. Even right now, I still do the same thing, whether it's just, hey, what's up? Just checking in, that type of deal. But I contact at least 10 coaches a day. And my job that I currently do, I travel all over the country. So wherever I'm working at, I'll go introduce myself to every school. Like if I'm working in Pittsburgh, I'll go to Robert Morris, I go to Duquesne, I go to Pitt, whatever D2, D3 schools in the area. I just go and introduce myself, sit down with the guys. But I've been doing that for over 10 years. And what had happened is once my initial recruiting class came out, I really tried to do a good job of helping my kids narrow down schools that are a good fit, proper playing level, that type of deal. And I'm extremely honest in that process. I know me and you talked off, in other ventures about how, helping kids navigate their recruitment. But I think the coaches appreciate my honesty with them, because sometimes coaches, like, you might call me and say, Fred, we really like Bob over there. And I'd be like, Bob can't play for you. I'll go ahead and tell you up front, hey, this kid can't play for you. I know you saw him last weekend. He played good, but he can't play for you. And a lot of times the coaches will go back and rewatch tape and be like, yeah, coach, you were right. So I think that honesty helped build that rapport with the coaches, and it definitely helped my kids out, because now when I say, hey, come watch Ray play today at 3 o'clock and let me know what you think. Now you come back and say, and I really undersell my kids a lot. I'll be like, he's a pretty good ball player. Just let me know what you think. And you come out there and do your thing. And next thing you know, Ray's got 22 offers in one weekend or something crazy. But the reputation of people trusting that I wasn't going to waste their time, that's the biggest part of the relationship that I built. So now if I call a coach about a kid, they're going to at least take a look to see what I got and if he fits with what they're looking at. So that network is absolutely the reason why those kids went to school. Now, the kids still have to perform when the coach shows up.
Right.
But as far as getting the coaches to come, that's definitely built off relationships. And I passed those, like I signed each one of my coaches at 16 and 17U. I give them coaches each week to contact before the live event. Let them know your schedule, call them with your schedule, introduce yourself, and we're going to make sure our floor is packed. And that was the assignment. If they didn't do that, then they can't coach for me. Because if you're going to work for the kids, you have to work for the kids. And that's the biggest part of their work. I also dragged my guys out during the live periods. We found out what hotel the coaches were staying in. And sometimes we wouldn't get back in the room till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Just going in and talking to all the college coaches. And then we would get up 8 o'clock game, go coach, and do the same thing the next night. So that's part of the grind to get these kids in school. But you have to put that work in. There's a lot of people have that old school mentality that where you play on the EYBL, Under Armour, whatever, the coaches just see you and they're going to offer you. You know as well as I do, you come into those events with certain guys you're already looking at, that you're looking like you're not going in just casting a broad net. You got a list. I need to make sure my guys on that list, and that way my kids don't fall between the cracks. So it definitely takes a lot of work and a lot of networking.
What do you feel like you're going to miss most? And I believe I might know the answer to this question, but what are you going to miss most about being a part of or jumping out of the AAU scene for the time being?
Really the off the court stuff. Spending the time with the kids. We always stayed in houses. We started doing that about the last 6 years, where we could have each 7 teams would stay in the house, 6 teams would stay in a different house. But we would talk to the kids. We do, just whatever. Just when you really got to know the kids. We always try to make sure to do one event as a team building at each stop. That stuff was cool. Like really getting to know the kids and hearing what their goals were, and just clowning around with the coaching staffs and all that stuff. Like I love that part of it. The basketball side of it, I'll miss because it's especially the in-state stuff. Like you play against, Jeff McGinnis and all those guys like CP3s, the team walls. There's still a certain pride in that. Like you want to go beat the teams in your state. Mm-hmm. So that was always fun getting a match up with those guys. So I miss that environment. But being able to just be around the kids and the AAU vans and the hotels and all that stuff, that was the real special parts that you'll miss because you can't duplicate that. There's no other level that you could duplicate those experiences.
Yeah. Coach, what would you advise if someone came up to you who's a 38-year-old parent and they have a child who is 10 years old and say, Coach, we have an opportunity to play for this team and this team, and our schedules won't conflict. 2 really talented teams. What do you think we should do, Coach? Do you think it's okay if we play for both? Do you think we need to choose one? And from a director standpoint, that's extremely important because, loyalty is such a big thing. But at the same time, you're trying to do what's best for your child. But I've never had to navigate these waters before. So what would you suggest, Coach?
I always tell parents, be careful who you put your kids around because it's not just ball. That's one thing. And then overusage is a big thing for me. Especially at 10 years old, I tell my kids skill development should be 90%. The games is pretty much just to figure out what you need to keep working on in your development process. You don't need to play every single weekend. So I would tell them, no, I wouldn't play for 2 teams. Not unless, only way I would say play for 2 teams is if you plan on like, I call them mom and pop, but say you plan on just a team with your friends and the skill level is all over the place. Some kids can't dribble, but you have a chance to go play with a really good team to find out where you're at. I could understand that as well, but I think at some point you need to make the transition to the really good team permanently if you're that good. But at 10 years old, again, I tell parents all the time, we don't know what's going to happen with that group because I had one of those groups. My first team, we scored like 4 points in the first game and then won states the next year with the same kids. Like I tell people all the time, the God-given is going to kick in at some point, like a Sasha Kalea-Jones who was 6'7" and didn't know what to do. And then next thing you know, like 2 summers later, he's 6'10", 6'11", and he's a McDonald's All-American. At 10 years old, we don't know what these kids are going to be. So I just tell them put them around good adults. If they're working on skill development, stay. Like, the team is going to catch up. They're going to get better. But playing two teams, you're dealing with probably 4 or 5 different coaches, probably 2 different mindsets. And the more voices that kid hears, the more confused he's going to be. So you just put him around the best situation that's going to make him a better kid, and that they emphasize development the most. Just winning games ain't going to mean nothing once you get to 9th grade. 9th, 10th, 11th grade, can he play? That's all the college coaches care about. They don't care if you won AAU states at 9 and under. Like, it just doesn't matter. So I would tell that parent, and also to save her money, you don't need to be paying hotel fees, tournament entry costs, eating dinner on those trips, putting gas in your car. You just throwing that money down the trash. Like, you could hand that money to a good skill developer and pay for another 2-3 months of skill development. That's going to be way more valuable than spending that money on that hotel and that food. It just doesn't make sense.
Investment. Some people don't make the correct investments. I would say personally that, like you said, you want to try to find the program where is going to be the most competitive. I would say that you want to know the personnel on that team and what the opportunity is for B to be on the court, for my child to be on the court, and also who is coaching and what are we learning while we're with him. Like you said, be around good people. Are they teaching us how to play basketball? I would refrain from playing with 2 teams. However, if I did play for 2 teams, it would be the talented team, and it would be the team where I can go play, where there's not everything on the line. There's not, in the grand scheme, because there's always going to be yelling, right? But
correct,
there's just less pressure, and I can just go out and have fun, and you still want to play well, but it's not the stage.
correct.
And then the biggest thing is, like, you want to try to find a program that you can be loyal to, and you know that, and vice versa, that program is going to be loyal at the same time. The only problem with that is you would love for both parties to be loyal, but it's always going to come down to how talented is this young man, because if we're loyal at 10, going both ways, but when he gets to 15 and he's not one of those top kids anymore, then that's where it gets iffy, because then it turns into a business, no matter,
Definitely.
That's just what it turns into.
Definitely.
So it's a tough question. It's especially if there's a parent who hasn't been in it before and doesn't understand it.
Yeah, because what happens is same thing with college. You develop a reputation. So if Fred's played on 6 AAU teams, or you're with a different team every weekend, once you get to that high school level and we really have to invest serious money in you, I'm not going to put that behind you, because I don't know if you're going to show up the next weekend. You're going to be playing with a different team the following weekend. Like, it's hard to financially back a situation like that, not knowing that the kid's going to be there for you every weekend. Or I don't feel like I could coach you up, because I feel like if I get on Ray too much, then he's just going to go back to the other team and play. So I don't really have any interest in that. I would advise parents, if you can get in a program that has whatever 8 and under to 17 and under, and they have success at the high school program every year, there's no need for you to leave, because the blueprint's already set for you. You can look at your 17 and under team while you're 10 and under and see these kids going to college. You're probably in a good program already. Like, I used to ask some kids sometimes, they would call me from other programs and say, hey, when's y'all's tryouts? And I know the kid plays for one of the other programs in the state that's reputable, and he's playing. I'll say, well, why do you want to leave? And usually the answers are real superficial. Well, I like the book bags y'all had last year, something stupid, and I'm telling the kid, like, that don't make sense. Like, you need to stay where you're at. A lot of people won't do that, though. The nature of this business. If I can get the most high profile kids, you hoping it benefits, yourself or your team or something to that extent. But everybody does business a different way. I put it that way. For me, I like my kids. I used to tell my kids, if I put you on my 9th grade team, if you don't go to school, I failed you, not vice versa. You didn't fail me, I failed you. So my kids knew at 15 and under, I was committed to them being in our program. Like I said, that was the drawing point for me. After 8th grade year, I would tell the parents, like, look, Ray is a good ball player, but he's not good enough to go play on that circuit. And, that's a decision y'all have to make, because we would have a B team that would play like a regional schedule. If Ray wants to play on that regional team and get better, then that's fine. But I think he could go to this program and play a lot. and continue
Yeah.
to develop. I had that conversation with those parents after 8th grade. Because it did become a business. Under Armour wasn't giving us the money and the resources they gave us to put an average product out there on the floor. So, you know, I tell the kids, like, this is the make or break year, and this is what we're doing. So the parents knew up front, this is kind of what we're doing, but those conversations aren't had. And a lot of times the parents don't even ask those questions. They just assume if I'm on the team, I'm always going to be on the team, and it just doesn't work that way. But I would tell parents all the time, definitely research those programs, and just make sure that it's an environment that you want your kids to be in that they can learn from. Nothing else will outweigh that.
Yeah, and more so now than ever in 2020, gearing up to be 2021, you're going to be seen if you can play anywhere.
Definitely.
So the most important thing, especially for the young kids, is to find court time. I need to be on the court. You don't need to go and sit on the bench all weekend long. You need to go to a smaller tournament and play all weekend long and get your repetition. And at some point, there is going to be coaches there. Now, it may not be Duke, Carolina, and Kentucky, but that's not you. You know what I mean? That's not your level.
You're right.
But there might be
Correct.
some Ivy, Patriot, etc., where that's more of a fit. So repetition is most important. Let's find a way to get our kids on the court, and then if they are on the court and they're learning from that coach, let's try to find a way to stay loyal and just continue to get better. Not worry about what everybody else is doing and just focus on one day at a time trying to get better.
No question, because I think the biggest misconception or the biggest pitch that a lot of the circuit teams tell you is, I'm going to get you in school regardless. There's no just I'm going to get you in school, because even if I call Ray and he's at Yale and I say, hey, come watch this kid, if the kid doesn't play, you're not going to offer a kid that you've never seen put the ball on the court. So there's that misconception of a coach can just give a kid a scholarship. It's just not true. And I think a lot of the kids just assume if I play on the EYBL, Adidas, Under Armour, that just because I'm at that event, it validates me as a college basketball player. It doesn't. If you're not on that floor and the coach can actually go back to their boss and say, hey, we need to offer this kid and recruit him, he's not getting a scholarship. He's not getting recruited. So I see it a lot more now, and I'm helping everybody. There's a lot of EYBL kids with no offers. There's a lot of Adidas kids with no offers. There's a lot of Under Armour kids with no offers because they went to programs or played at a level that they didn't get a chance to show what they could really do. And you could be really talented, but it's a difference on playing the EYBL and playing at whatever, Phenom or Big Shots. You're still a good ball player, but it's different when Scotty Barnes is on the side of you. You playing against a pro. There's a big difference in playing against a pro and playing against other high school kids and understanding your place in that, and that you can still go to college playing against those kids. A lot of kids say, oh, I want that matchup against whoever, Cole Anthony. You don't want that matchup because it's going to make you look way worse than what you really are. And if I'm a college coach and that's the only game I saw, I'm always going to remember you were the kid that Cole Anthony scored 50 points on. Like, that's what I'm going to remember you as for the rest of that time. So a lot of parents and a lot of kids don't understand, like, you only have like 5 or 6 weekends to get that scholarship. You can't afford to miss out on any playing time or any exposure. You just can't afford to do it. But that's the biggest misconception a lot of travel ball coaches would pitch, is I'm going to get you a scholarship. It's just not true. It's just not true.
One thing that I've noticed this past summer, and still even, kind of going now because teams are still, to a certain extent, playing AAU basketball, is that some kids have had some pretty good summers, but the teams that they're playing against, there's 2, maybe 3 high-level kids, real dogs, goons, high IQ, athletic, skilled, where in a regular summer when you go play at certain tournaments, the teams that you're playing against, if you play well, first of all, there's coaches there on the sideline, changes everything. But not only that, but you're playing against 1 through 11 or 12 who could really go. And the kids have, the kids are, they get caught up in the moment. And I think that a lot of them feel that they are who I know they aren't, but they just don't know because they haven't
Right.
been in that on the stage before. And the problem is there's people telling them that, man, you had 25, 10, and 8, man, high major. And it's like,
Right.
no, because you did that
Right.
against two D1s, two D2s, and five D3 kids. It's a
Definitely.
different level, a different stage that kids will only know if they have the opportunity to play in it. And I'm hopeful that they do, and I'm hopeful that they perform well. But
Correct.
I think this summer was a false sense of security for a lot of kids because there just wasn't enough, for a lack of better words, real basketball.
Comp. Definitely. I speak to that point. My first time when our first game on the UA circuit, we played Mo Williams Elite. And we walked out on the floor. They had P.J. Washington, Skylar Mays, Billy Preston, Terrence Ferguson, Mark Vitale. And it was like, okay, like this different. Like you playing, these are 4 dudes. And there was other guys on the team, but those are the 4. Skylar Mays is 6'4", 6'5", playing the 1. Terrence Ferguson, 6'7", at shooting guard. Like they were like, and it was kind of like, okay, the next game we played, they had Miles Bridges and Josh Jackson on the same team. So you begin to understand, like, okay, when they say it's levels to it, there's levels to it. And like you said, you got 2 pros. We played against like 4 or 5 NBA players in the first 2 games of that circuit. So we had to go back and readjust and tell the kids, like, look, this this is a different ball game now. We have to make these adjustments or we're going to get killed out here. But you don't know until you know. And a lot of times people don't know. Even a lot of the evaluators and stuff, they haven't covered the national events to be able to see what high major looks like. And I tell a lot of kids, high major, first and foremost to me, is a lot about size by position. There's a big difference in the point guard at a Big 10, Big 12, ACC, and the MAC as far as what the physical appearance is going to look like. Not to say that the kids in the other level is not as good, but the physical appearance is going to draw high major. If you Scotty Barnes and you 6'9" and can play 3, 4, and 5, it's high major, and he can do it at a high level. If you are another 6'9" kid and you're doing it at a local event, it's not a skill thing. You're just 6'9", and you're probably playing against another kid that's 6'4", 6'5" at that same event, or a 6'9" kid that's really not developed yet. It's not comparable. So I tell my kids, we'll know what you are when we get you in front of what a real D1 basketball player looks like. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you find out, okay, well, I'm not D1, I'm D2. That's part of the process. But a lot of people really, that's the downfall of social media. When you got 700 comments of people like, oh, he high major schools, take a look at this kid. I mean, it's really setting the kids up for failure 9 times out of 10. There's a couple of kids that are no-brainers, but when I watched this summer, I watched a lot of streaming basketball, and a lot of kids benefited, like you said, from this being a pandemic year. Because under normal circumstances, I don't think their recruitment would have been as high as it was against the regular competition. I just don't see that being the case.
I just want the kids to try to do their best to remain humble and not get caught up in the moment, because when those lights come on and you're playing against the likes of who you were just speaking about, and there's 45 high major coaches there, head
Right.
coaches, associates, and the environment is hectic,
Right.
that's when we want you to play well. Okay, you're supposed to play. If you're high major, you're supposed to play well at Phenom and Big Shots and Hoop Group and
Right.
basketball or whatever else you're supposed to kill there. You're supposed to play well there. But stay humble, continue to hone your craft, because again, at some point those lights are gonna come on, and those dogs are gonna be drooling. And the coaches are going to be sitting there with their legs crossed like this.
Right.
And your heart is going to be racing a million miles a minute. So be ready for that.
Correct. And I don't think, like, this summer, it was basically like pickup games. You had kids playing on a hodgepodge of teams. Like, there was no structure, really. It was just kids playing ball.
Yeah.
If you're the right build and the right athleticism, you're going to flourish in that environment. It's almost like playing in an all-star game all weekend. But when you slow that game down and there's really some competitiveness to those games, and like you said, you got Roy Williams sitting on the baseline, it's different. It's different. It's different for you as a coach. It's different for you as a
Yeah, that's what I was
director.
gonna
It's
say.
different
It's
for you as
different
a player.
coaches.
Like, yeah, it's different. But the kids realize it's real at that point. When you at the free throw line and you see Tom Izzo and all these guys under the basket, it's a little harder to shoot that free throw. It's just a different environment. And being, having the experience of seeing all three, like the shoe levels, like when you go to Peach Jam is what it is because the environment is just different. Under Armour has good teams, Adidas has good teams, but the way Peach Jam is set up, if a kid really flourishes in that environment, yeah, they probably a star. Like you probably a program changing kid. Every kid's not that. I tell all the kids all the time, it's a different type of kid to be good on the EYBL. If I'm Harry Giles, I go play EYBL because his track is a fast track. He's gonna be a Power 5 blue blood kid and a pro. That's who they kind of cater to. I think Under Armour and Adidas, you can find your way and kind of make your experience what it's going to be. Like you can grow on those two platforms. But Nike, if I'm a kid that's kind of on the line of being really good, I wouldn't go to EYBL because that's not what that platform set up for. That's set up for a top level kid. If you're an under the radar kid, I wouldn't go play EYBL because you're not going to get enough minutes to ever overcome that. So it's just kind of understanding the business of each circuit, which platform is going to work for you. There's definitely a strategy to it if you really care about the kids. If you're just trying to win games and get the most exposure, hey, go with whoever gives you the most shoes and book bags. But if you really care about your career, finding that right strategy, you can definitely make a name for yourself at all levels, in all avenues. There's no question about that. But it's definitely different levels to this. That environment changes a whole lot. And that pressure of you have to win to qualify for UA finals, Peach Jam, whatever the case may be, the kids play way harder than just the local events because it's more on the line for those kids. So, like I said, I'm proud of all the kids. I'm glad they got what they got because of the pandemic. And as you know, it's going to be definitely harder going forward for high school kids to get recruited, dealing with the one-time transfer rule, the JUCO, with the free year the kids got this year. It's going 2021 class, it's going to be tough. 2022, I think, is going to be tough as well. But for the kids who did get what they wanted to get, kudos to those kids. But be ready. When you get on campus, just be ready. It's not going to be as easy as you think it's going to be.
Talk to me quickly, Coach, about your transition into Ascension, what you're going to be, what you believe you're going to be able to provide, and then what you see for yourself and your company in the near future.
Gotcha. So Ascension Sports Consulting is what I kind of moved over to from Team Felton basketball. Initially, I had started Ascension Sports so I could help other kids from other programs get recruited if it was slow while doing Team Felton. Reason why I felt like I had to do a different name, because if you were another AAU program helping kids, a lot of times they feel like, hey, he's trying to steal my kid or all that stuff. So through Ascension, I was able to help kids that I really liked. I liked their games and really thought they really were being under-recruited. A kid, for example, like Xavier McLean, played against him with Team Wall a lot, and I just didn't understand why his recruitment wasn't whatever, and I was able to work with Kendrick with Team Wall, and that kid ended up having, somewhere close to 10 offers. But that's really what I wanted to move to, is I didn't want to be restricted to just helping Team Felton kids. I want to be able to help kids all across the country. So I do provide services to help high school kids receive consulting on their recruiting. The bigger portion of my company is helping D1 transfers in the transfer portal get placed, and streamlining that process for both the player and the coaching staffs of these schools. So, and JUCO placement. So a lot of times, a lot of D1, D2 schools will call me and say, Fred, I'm looking for 6'8" small forward and do X, Y, and Z. And depending on who that school is, I'll provide them with a list of kids. This is the contact. This is the circle they're in. This is what they're looking for, X, Y, and Z. So now the college coaches know whether they're wasting their time or not. I have access to all the transcripts, everything. So they don't have to, that is very streamlined to speed that process up. I'm also doing sports marketing for, starting to get in with a lot of the search firms. So a lot of times I'm able to send over a lot of coaching profiles to search firms and stuff like that to kind of help promote jobs. So it's a little bit of everything. Eventually, what I hope to do is make this a full-fledged sports management, sports marketing company that I do full time. That's the goal in the near future, is to totally transcend, to be able to take kids from high school to college, and then from college to professional ranks, and help them, basically consult them all the way through. That's the ultimate end goal.
How can people get a hold of you? Social media and email.
So Ascension Sports Consulting at gmail.com through email, and then it's Ascension Sports Consulting on all social media platforms, or you can find Frederick Cannon on all social media. And one thing I always put out to parents, I don't help everybody. I'm not into this as a money grab. If I really don't think your son or daughter can play at that level that you're acquiring to get to, I'll just tell them I'm not the best fit to help you. So the first part of that process is I need full game film to watch. And based on what I watch, I'll kind of let the parents know, like, from my standpoint, I don't see your son or daughter being a collegiate basketball player. Or I'll say, look, if I take you on as a client, I'm going to advertise you to D2 or D3 schools. I think this would be a good situation for you. If they agree with that process or that plan, then we move forward. But it's not just an open grab to help kids. I really have to believe that you are a collegiate basketball player before we move forward. So before a lot of parents, I get a lot of emails and inboxes of mixtapes of 5'8" power forwards, and I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not a miracle worker. So I'll go ahead and let them know, look, I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong. I hope there's a coach that will take the 5'8" power forward. I'm just not going to take that job on. If somebody trusts me with their dreams and goals of playing college basketball, I want it to be mutually that I really feel like you can achieve that goal. Otherwise, I'm not going to take you on as a client. But I will provide the feedback and all that stuff for free. But if we start moving forward, then it's a paid process. But I wouldn't take your money unless I really feel like you can play collegiate basketball. So I like for kids and parents both to know that up front. So it's not a guarantee that I'll take you on as a client. You definitely have to be, you have to pass that test of me watching that game film and feeling like you could play at the next level.
Is it too early? Is there a time that's too early for parents and players to reach out to you?
No, I think it's good to get the consulting early. So like if you're 9th and 10th grade and you really don't understand the process, calling just to get information on how it works, I would do that anyway. But as far as paying for the process, it really depends on the kid. If it's a Joey Baker type kid, then probably not. You've got the size by position already. You have good high school film. You have good travel ball film. 9th or 10th grade, my goal for those type kids, I get your recruitment started. And then, like I do, once you pick up 9 or 10 offers, it really kind of just snowballs from there. Other than you need my consultant maybe on the 11th and 12th grade, the rest of the high school time will take care of itself. And then if you just need consultation on what schools to try to narrow down to, stuff like that, then we can go back to that, at that later juncture. But with the COVID situation going on now, it's probably going to change it a little bit. I probably would recommend at least 10th, 11th grade getting an evaluation. Hey, where's my kid trending at right now? And that's that. When I go get the evaluation, it's not strictly based on my opinion. I'll send it out to some college coaches at all levels and say, hey, what do you think about this kid? And I'll send the feedback directly back to the parent. So I'll send D1, high major, low major, D2, D3, and JUCO, and you'll get feedback from all of them. And if they say, man, Fred, that kid stinks, that's the text you're going to get. This coach said your son stinks. So, they'll get real-time feedback from a college coach. So they'll know already, like, this is what, the evaluation of my son or daughter is. And they can either say, hey, sometimes coaches say, well, Fred, he's not very good right now, but if he can develop X, Y, and Z, he might. The parents can now take that information and do what they want to with it to determine whether they want to put that effort into achieving that, that scholarship or not. But they'll have real information. It's not hoping. I tell parents, recruiting is not a situation to be hoping. Either you're good enough or you're not. And that consensus is usually pretty clear. If you ask 4 or 5 coaches, if you're not good enough, they usually let you know honestly up front, he's not good enough or she's not good enough. At that point, you either have to accept the reality or, you know, something's gonna have to kick in. That God given will have to kick in quick because otherwise it's not gonna be an opportunity for you. So, but that real time feedback, a lot of times parents don't want to hear that honest truth, but you've been in the business on the coaching side. You're not getting paid to, you know, be a I would say like a volunteer worker. It's not Boys and Girls Club, you know.
No, you
Whatever
want
college,
you want to find
whatever.
players that your head coach believes can make the program better.
Correct, because you will lose your job. And I would that's my feedback to a lot of college coaches. If you take that kid, coach, you're going to lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand if your kid comes in and he can't play, one, it makes me look extremely bad. It makes you look extremely bad. And I just don't want that cycle to be started from anybody that I'm dealing with. So honest feedback, a lot of people don't like it, but it's a necessity in order for long term.
But in most cases, there is a fit for everyone. It just may not be the fit that you believed in the first place. However, this is why I'm here to help you.
Correct.
And coach, is this for both boys and girls?
That's correct. So I help girls basketball players and boys. So the girl side is definitely different. The process is a lot different. The boys side is more tiered. And what I mean by that is to get a Wake Forest boys offer means different than get a Wake Forest girls offer. And the reason why I say that is girls aren't necessarily going to college thinking, hey, I got to go pro. 9 out of 10 boys that you talk to going to play college basketball think they're going to be a pro. Hey, coach, I'm just going to go overseas. Hey, coach, I'm going to play in the league. Mm-hmm. Girls are looking more often majors, what city is in, do I want to live there? The recruiting process is a little more, I don't want to say realistic, but they're definitely thinking more long-term than most boys that I talk to. So that's been an interesting kind of phenomenon that I kind of stumbled on, but I definitely help both girls and boys and give the same feedback either way. The process is the exact same, but it's just interesting to see how the girls view it and boys view it on the recruiting side.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring this thing to an end. Coach, I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. I know that I got better, and my goal for us to try to provide some content that is fruitful and will help some people, I think we were able to do. Let's continue to build our relationship. I look forward to getting with you and trying to help you in any way possible and continue to grow with you. And again, I thank you for coming on the Trophy Room episode 8. And that's all I got. I appreciate you. Much love.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Coach. I'll talk to you soon, all right?
That sounds good.
All right, cool. Peace.